of late, for us at least, we've been paying attention to all the violence in Mexico, reporting what we can, whatever makes it to official media sources, and there's plenty. Can you just imagine the stuff that doesn't make it to the media? Joining us on 710 KURV, we welcome back to the show from Stratfor, Mexico security analyst Tristan Reed. TR, welcome back. Let's talk about the State Department advisory that went out. From all the data that you've collected, what went into that?
Thanks, Sergio. So these are periodic updates. State Department releases them multiple times per year. Most recently, though, to cause this update was the violence that we saw in southwest Mexico around Guadalajara, where Mexican federal troops and gunmen clashed throughout the state and in other states as well simultaneously, which prompted the State Department to release an updated advisory.
The advisory includes us as well, Reynosa and Matamoros, Nuevo Laredo. There was an incident just a few days back near Monterrey. I believe there were 9 officers, Mexican officers. They were kidnapped by some gangs in northern Mexico, later rescued. One was killed in a confrontation. We've seen a spate of violence. It seems that it's going north again. It was quiet. It seemed to be quiet there for a while, although some others would say that, well, that violence just doesn't make it to the media. What are your folks saying in Mexico?
So Tamaulipas, it has for many years now has had very high levels of criminal violence, not just, the gang violence and fighting over different turfs, but just general crime. Not much has actually changed in terms of threat levels to bystanders in the state. A lot of the recent violence that we've seen in Tamaulipas has been the result of military operations. The reason why that matters to everyday bystanders is the violence that results from military operations tends to be shorter-lived. There are exceptions right now in southwest Mexico. The Mexican government is facing an uphill battle against the crime group down there. But in Tamaulipas, organized crime is broken down into so many different gangs. These gangs are not nearly as powerful, although there's more of them. They're not nearly as powerful as organized crime was in Tamaulipas a few years ago. So a lot of these crime bosses are falling very quickly to federal troops.
Yeah, we saw one capo that was arrested recently. I think the last 2-3 weeks they paraded some guy that was a chief near us. So would you say that Mexican law enforcement / Mexican military is making gains on some fronts?
Yes, Tamaulipas organized crime has broken down considerably. As of right now, there's 2 major crime groups that operate out of Tamaulipas. You have Los Zetas, and then you have the rivals, the Velazquez Network, which also calls itself the Gulf Cartel sometimes, but it was really a splinter group of Los Zetas after Los Zetas, the Gulf Cartel. And the recent violence that we've been seeing in that state has been the military going after the crime bosses, the newer generations of crime bosses that are emerging in Tamaulipas.
Mexico security analyst for Stratfor, Tristan Reed, our guest on 710 KURV.
Tristan, Tim Sullivan here. So the murder rate that we saw in Mexico under President Calderon, that appears to have dropped significantly, but the violence continues under President Peña Nieto, and it's this violence that breaks out at random, apparently, between rival factions of the Gulf Cartel. And as more and more of these Gulf Cartel, or I guess any cartel leaders, are captured, are we seeing an end to some of these cartels, or is this a sign of things ramping up again?
Well, of course, there's a lot more to improving security in areas of Mexico than just going after the crime bosses. You have to improve public institutions. There's a lot of socioeconomic factors that go into crime rates. So there's a lot more to it than just simply going after these guys. Now, in terms of the structure of organized crime in Tamaulipas, Mexico City has made significant gains, and that has greatly reduced the overall power of individual crime bosses in Tamaulipas. It's important to remember violence and insecurity in Mexico is not uniform. There's many safe areas of the country, which is what the travel advisory also highlights. For instance, places all the way west in Ciudad Juarez have been light years in improvements over the last few years. Tamaulipas State is one of those locations in Mexico that the government has struggled significantly with. A lot of it has to do with very weak public security institutions. Mm-hmm. However, but the structure itself, they've been successful in breaking down organized crime in that state.
Let me ask you then, you mentioned all of the things that go into ramping down cartel crime, cleaning up, not only going after the leaders, but cleaning up the police, the corrupt police agencies, and the corrupt judicial system. From your analysis, how much of the Comprehensive Merit Initiative has played a role in cleaning things up down there, to a certain extent anyway?
The U.S. has provided Mexico with as much support as Mexico wants to have regarding fighting organized crime.
And it's mostly hardware, right, T? That's what it is, mostly hardware.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and the federal troops, whether it's law enforcement, well, specifically it's law enforcement, they do use a lot of the equipment that comes from that initiative.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is very helpful. It's definitely a partnership between the U.S. and Mexico in tackling these crime groups.
Well, in a more relevant day-to-day, I know that you talk to clients who are in business, corporations, and folks internationally who ask you, okay, what's going on? You need to tell us what's on the ground. What do you recommend? So what do you tell a client who says, look, I really need to travel in Mexico. I have to go to the industrial north of Monterrey, or I need to hit the highway and visit Maquilas on the border. What do you say to them? Because they might wind up in a situation where there's a roadblock, a firefight, things like that. What do you say to them when they face a situation like that?
Again, it completely depends on the location of where any particular person will be traveling. Regarding Tamaulipas, we make a note that the highways throughout that state carry considerable risk to bystanders. Now, the majority of people that travel on these highways are not going to encounter any problems, but the risks are still there, and for a lot of people, that's enough for them to defer travel. So, specifically in the northeast of Mexico, with the border of Texas, a lot of those areas are insecure, and we will let people know about that. Whether you're traveling on highways and you have to encounter roadblocks, or simply a passenger bus is being targeted by bandits, those are common things in Tamaulipas.
Tristan, thanks for your time. Tristan Reed from Stratfor, Mexico security analyst, joining us on 710 KURV.